The practice of mummifying cats in ancient Egypt is one of the most fascinating examples of how deeply religion, culture, and daily life were intertwined in one of the world's earliest civilizations. To modern observers, the discovery of vast cat cemeteries and millions of carefully preserved feline mummies may seem strange or even excessive. However, when examined within the spiritual and cultural context of ancient Egyptian society, the reason cats were mummified becomes much clearer. Cats were not simply pets. They were sacred animals associated with powerful divine forces, symbols of protection, and participants in complex religious rituals. The real reason cats were mummified lies in a combination of religious devotion, symbolism, and the belief that animals could serve as intermediaries between humans and the gods. To understand why cats were mummified, it is important first to recognize the role cats played in everyday Egyptian life. Egypt's agricultural society relied heavily on grain storage, which naturally attracted rodents and pests. Cats became valuable allies because they hunted mice, rats, and snakes that threatened food supplies. Over time, Egyptians developed a deep appreciation for cats, not only for their practical benefits, but also for their graceful behavior and mysterious independence. Their ability to see in the dark, move silently, and fiercely protect their territory likely contributed to the belief that cats possessed special spiritual qualities. As a result, cats gradually moved from being useful household animals to becoming creatures worthy of reverence. This reverence became closely tied to religion through the goddess Bastet, one of the most beloved deities in ancient Egyptian mythology. Bastet was originally depicted as a lioness, symbolizing power and ferocity. But over time, she evolved into a gentler goddess, often represented as a domestic cat or a woman with a cat's head. Bastet was associated with protection, fertility, motherhood, and the home. Egyptians believed she guarded families against evil spirits and disease, particularly protecting women and children. Because cats were seen as living manifestations or symbols of Bastet, harming a cat was considered a serious crime. Historical accounts suggest that killing a cat, even accidentally, could lead to severe punishment. This deep religious respect elevated cats to a sacred status rarely granted to animals in other ancient cultures. The mummification of cats developed within this religious framework. In ancient Egypt, mummification was a sacred process designed to preserve the body for the afterlife. Egyptians believed that the soul needed a physical body to inhabit after death. While this practice is most famously associated with human pharaohs and nobles, animals connected to the gods were also mummified. Cats, because of their connection to Bastet, became one of the most commonly mummified animals. When a beloved household cat died, families sometimes chose to mummify the animal as a sign of respect and devotion. The preserved cat could accompany its owner spiritually or continue serving the goddess in the afterlife. However, the real scale of cat mummification goes far beyond individual pets. Archaeologists have discovered enormous cat burial sites across Egypt, containing thousands or even millions of mummified cats. One famous site, discovered in the 19th century, held such a large number of cat mummies that they were reportedly transported by the ton. This suggests that cat mummification was not only a personal act of devotion, but also part of a larger religious industry connected to temple rituals. In many cases, cats were mummified as votive offerings. Ancient Egyptians commonly presented offerings to the gods in hopes of receiving blessings, protection, or healing. Instead of leaving simple objects such as food or jewelry, worshippers sometimes offered mummified animals associated with specific deities. For Bastet, the most appropriate offering was a cat. Pilgrims visiting temples dedicated to Bastet could purchase a prepared cat mummy and present it to the goddess as a symbolic prayer. The mummified animal acted as a spiritual message, carrying the worshipper's request to the divine world. Because of the high demand for these offerings, temples eventually developed organized systems for breeding and preparing animals specifically for mummification. Archaeological studies suggest that many of the cats found in these burial sites were raised in temple environments, and died at a young age. This indicates that the production of cat mummies was likely managed by priests and temple workers as part of a structured religious economy. The process involved carefully wrapping the cat's body in linen, sometimes arranging the bandages in decorative patterns, and placing the mummy in a small coffin or container. Some coffins were beautifully crafted, with painted images of cats, demonstrating the importance of these offerings. Despite the large-scale nature of this practice, the Egyptians did not view it as cruel or exploitative. From their perspective, these animals were fulfilling a sacred role by serving the gods and helping humans communicate with the divine. The act of mummification honored the animal and ensured that its spiritual essence continued to exist in the afterlife. In this way, the practice reflected the Egyptian worldview, which emphasized balance, harmony, and the interconnectedness of humans, animals, and deities. Another interesting aspect of cat mummification is the emotional bond between Egyptians and their feline companions. Ancient writings and artwork often depict cats sitting beneath chairs, accompanying families during meals, or even wearing jewelry. Some historical accounts describe families shaving their eyebrows as a sign of mourning when a pet cat died. This suggests that beyond their religious symbolism, cats were genuinely loved members of the household. Mummification, therefore, could also represent an expression of grief and respect, much like modern pet memorial practices. Over time, the cult of Bastet became especially prominent in the city of Bubastis, where a grand temple was dedicated to the goddess. Festivals honoring Bastet attracted thousands of pilgrims, who celebrated with music, feasting, and religious ceremonies. During these festivals, offerings of cat mummies likely increased significantly, further reinforcing the practice. The presence of massive cat cemeteries near these temple complexes provides strong archaeological evidence of how widespread the tradition became. In conclusion, the real reason cats were mummified in ancient Egypt cannot be reduced to a single explanation. It was the result of a complex combination of religious belief, cultural reverence, economic activity, and emotional connection. Cats symbolized divine protection through their association with the goddess Bastet, served as sacred offerings in temple rituals, and held an honored place within Egyptian households. By mummifying cats, the ancient Egyptians were not merely preserving animals. They were expressing their devotion to the gods, their respect for the spiritual world, and their appreciation for a creature that had become both a protector and a sacred symbol. This practice reveals how deeply animals were woven into the spiritual and daily life of ancient Egypt, leaving behind a legacy that continues to fascinate historians and archaeologists thousands of years later.